So welcome to the Agility Transformation Podcast. I'm Kelly Fide here with Reimar Paschke, and thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation on change and how to make it sustainable. So how about if we start with an introduction? Who are you, what do you do, and how did you get there?
Sure. So let me read my bio to you. I was born now.
I'm like, oh no.
No, I'm an engineer by education. As a matter of fact, I'm engineer number 6 in a row in our family. My son is number 7.
Huh.
Somehow I had that in my genes, but somehow, somewhat 10 years or so into my working as an engineer, I had a boss who we thought was a jerk, and he certainly thought we were jerks. And he couldn't cope with us, and he gave us two coaches to work with us. In a way, probably he thought fix them, and of course those coaches didn't fix us, but worked in a, to me, astonishing way of making us aware that we can dance, sing, jump, cry, whatever we want. We will not be able to change that boss. The only person in the world that we can change is us. So I somehow got that virus from that workshop, and they realized that I was so interested, ending them asking me whether I wanted to take a coaching education. So I did that, but still kept working as an engineer for a couple of more years, like 10 years or so. And then when I had again the next job offer, which was one of those firefighting jobs that I had done so often. For the first time in my life, I was in my inner state very clear of saying, no, I will not take that job. And the boss was puzzled, and my boss, who was reporting to him, so he was the boss. He said, you know what, your career is done. You are history if you do that.
Wow.
And I said, yes, I know, and I know in my inner self, I know it's the right decision. So this conversation with my boss that was scheduled for half an hour, then all of a sudden spread over 3 hours. Him becoming totally open to the idea that the culture of his organization is quite dysfunctional, and becoming aware of what his contribution to that was. And I ended up leaving the office with a new job, being OD consultant to that unit.
How fascinating.
So by saying no, I got what I wanted. And that was really great. And then for the next 10 years, I was in leadership education. And the last 3 of them turned into becoming a change consultant, I wanted to say. And I don't like the word consulting so much in that respect. I rather like the word facilitator. Because for me, I mean, the job I'm doing right now is called change management. And the hiring I already said, I hate the word change management. And people were proud that they had a job for change, so they were insulted. And why do you hate it? I mean, we are proud that we have this job. If you really mean it, if you really want true change deep down the iceberg, you cannot manage that. In my belief, because management for me implies that you not only know exactly where you want to go, but that you have a pretty good idea of how to get there. And in true change, you cannot. Just
and,
like
and what do you mean when you say the iceberg and true change versus just sort of managing things on the surface?
For sure, if you introduce, well, even if you introduce a tool, or we introduced here in the company an open office concept early on.
Yeah.
You can manage, of course, that. You can manage the moving, you can manage that everybody has access to his applications. You can manage that, and you should manage that flawlessly. But for instance, an open office concept, you not only do for cost-saving purpose, but you want probably to increase collaboration. But if you don't go deep in why people want privacy, you will end up with resistance. So in my terms of whether you call it change or transformation, you need to go deep down enough in the iceberg where you hit then values and needs of people. Only once they feel that they are met, that opens them up for changing their way of working.
So there's something about deep change that has to do with looking for what's not immediately visible, like values and needs that are maybe behind people's behaviors. Is that kind of where you're going?
Yes, and for many managers, that is spooky, because quite normally they're educated as engineers, as commercials, rather they are experts in their field. But I found it interesting how difficult it is for them to accept that people are different and not cogs in a wheel.
Yeah, I mean, the world of engineering is very concrete. You know, you can see things, you can touch things, you can move them around, design them, build them. And it makes me curious what that's been like for you as an engineer, working in change, to talk to other engineers or people in a manufacturing environment about things they can't see.
Well, that's my big asset. That I actually I was hired for this job of leadership education because I was an engineer, because I was not an HR professional or a psychologist, and this is what people time and again mirrored me back in the programs and the courses, that they felt understood by and this is if we now look on change. This is where you need to meet people where they are, and then somehow I apparently radiate what I do and what I believe in so compellingly that they believed me and got curious and saw it somehow in action. What a non-mechanistic way of running a business could look like.
It's so interesting in terms of meeting people where they are. I think that's one of the most profound lessons that I've learned in my own coaching journey, the hard way, through the school of hard knocks.
Me too.
It's a good teacher, the school of hard knocks. And I remember this guy, Michael, and he was a lead QA, lead quality engineer. And this was maybe 15 years ago. I had just discovered behavior-driven development, which is something that can help quality engineers a lot. And I was so excited because Michael was super stressed out all the time. And I was excited to share this with him because I knew it could help. And so I prepared a presentation and I shared it with him. He got so mad at me. He thought I was being bossy and trying to tell him what to do. And he got so mad at me that he actually deleted his recommendation that he gave to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I've been there multiple times as well. And I recently came again across a teacher that I had. Well, it's too big to say he was my teacher. He was visiting us when we were educated as change agents in my former company, and he was Agile. And what I really love in his book Humble Consulting, when he says, do not separate change management from business. And this is probably the rule number one of meeting people where they are. You need to talk business with leaders to get their attention. Because the worst that can happen to you, if they label you as the Ah, yeah, he's the nice guy, the flower power guy.
Yeah, the
No,
hippie.
exactly. Change is, and behavioral change, that is really the hard stuff. It's not
So
the,
hard. What does that bring you when you successfully connect change and the business? What's important about connecting those two for you?
well, first you get the ear and the, you get on the calendar of bosses. Without you would you usually wouldn't even get an appointment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I really, I mean, I was one of these time pressured and under extreme delivery pressure engineer myself. So I think I know how how it feels like on their end, and so it's for them, the human being is an unknown or maybe even unpleasant thing. And what do we do when we have unpleasant things? We avoid it.
Of course.
So if you come, and really, I have been there a number of times. I learned about an exciting framework, and I thought this was so interesting.
Yeah.
And no, you cannot get the attention of a business leader with your beautiful frameworks. You need to first understand what really his issues are, and help him become aware that his problem is probably deeper in the iceberg layers than just on an operational level.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned the iceberg a couple of times. Could you clarify a little? I know it's a common metaphor people use to talk about culture. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I was dealing with pride from Ken Wilber's the four quadrants model, and I turned around the four quadrants of Ken Wilber to an iceberg, and I separate the iceberg into four quadrants.
Okay.
The vertical line is individual stuff. To the left and to the right, it's the collective stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And above the iceberg is what you see, as if you would have a camera running with or without tone. And below the iceberg is what you don't see. And in the lower left quadrant is what identity people bring to the table, what they are proud of, what they value, what they like, what they love, what needs they have. This is where the personality sits, and this is what you need to address, and or at least know how they are triggered if you want them to move. In the upper right, in the upper left, you then have the behavior of people, what you see them do.
Mm-hmm.
And in the upper right is the interesting quadrant of processes and systems and regulations and rules and all the tools that a manager usually has at hand. Guess what a manager typically does when he takes over a department? He thinks days or weeks, but at the end probably a reorganization is seen, which is in the upper right corner of that model. But in the lower right corner, only there you have culture. Only there you have how people collectively behave. And this below the iceberg you cannot influence directly. So this is why you cannot change culture directly. You can only change it indirectly by making people behave different in the upper left. Of course, in the upper right, structural changes help as well. But culture change is a result of that work.
So fascinating. I'll look up that link and I'll put it in the show notes so people can look at that model if they're interested.
Yeah.
And I just realized something. Both of us share this interest in change, but at a deeper level, like a cultural level and transformation, and also from a behavioral perspective. And I'm curious to ask you, what is important to you about this field of transformation? Where does your interest and your passion come from?
I felt in my worst days like shuffled around, and maybe it's because I was brought up in a way where I appreciate freedom, and when I personally I'm told something, I tend not to like that. And I really believe that in the VUCA world that we now live in, you can less and less tell people what to do. We hired professionals, and we quite often make them behave according to our rules, and that is taking away intelligence of people in the system that you need.
In a way, the system is losing out on their intelligence if we just give them direct orders.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the VUCA world. What is that?
Well, it's this acronym of volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, describing that nothing is certain anymore. I grew up in a world where the 5 forces of Porter, where the religion and doing business cases was your core tool.
Sure.
I was, for many years, I wanted to do an MBA to know how to plan things and how to do proper business cases. And to me, this VUCA world is, I mean, to me, it's a revelation, and it makes things much more fun and easy, because I really believe in finding out things as a byproduct of doing things rather than planning meticulously. Maybe it's a personal preference as well. I mean, if I have to repair something, I go into my cellar and look what's there, and then do something with what I find. Inspiring to me much more than properly designing engineering and.
Like, let's look at the right way and the rules, and then if we just follow the right way and we follow the rules, everything's going to be fine. But what, I can really relate with what you're saying, because what we're learning in this VUCA world is that planning can be good, but no plan survives contact with the enemy. And VUCA is such an interesting, not only concept but reality, because for me, as someone interested in transformation, it raises the question of how do we help organizations not only survive in an environment of constant change, but flourish? And and you mentioned that for you, it's actually more fun than, finding the quote right way and following the rules. What's fun about that for you?
Well, in MBTI terms, I am... what I really value is somewhat an outlying of my type. But to me, it's energizing if I don't know exactly where I will end up. And I see this with many people in the organization as well. And I'm working for a rather large company, and for a company with many decades of success in their bones. Predictability somehow is your first jacket, and that is almost like a, how do you call it, if you are
a straight jacket, like a
it like a straight jacket. You're so compelled to hit the figures and to serve the investors that you don't dare anymore to try out new things. And of course, I'm oversimplifying. That's so non-VUCA. And this is why I think, especially for large companies who were around quite a while, their success of the past is, well, for sure not guaranteeing, but maybe even hindering their success in the future.
For sure. I mean, so how do you have that conversation? Like, how do you bring those two sides together of, over here, the shareholders, the investors, the bottom line, we're running a company here, we're in the for-profit space. And then on the other side, what would a failure culture look like? What would experimentation, how do you bring those two sides together?
Well, two things. First, I'm really triggered by failure culture
Okay.
because I think if leaders hate the word failure, it's a good thing. Because usually a failure is if you do not if you do something weirdly wrong, or if you if you don't follow the rules, if it's something negative because it costs money.
Of course.
And what I might like so much more is a learning culture.
Oh, I love that. What do you just love about learning culture, that language?
Because there in the foreground is, no matter what happened, what can I take away from it? And it goes so far that people tell me, Reimar, can you please now see something negative as well? You always try to find positive things.
Interesting.
But that is, I think, in a VUCA world so badly needed. And for that, you need short iterations. You cannot, if a boss is totally right in hating failures if they are late and expensive. But if they come early, then it's so much more easy to say, we failed, or we didn't meet where we wanted to be. Great. What do we learn from that?
Yeah.
So it's really a deep cultural thing. And I think back to the idea, meet managers where they are. If you as a changer tell a manager, please now love failure, it's an uphill battle.
Right. They'll be like, I have KPIs and my KPIs are all about success. And I hear you making a really interesting distinction about time, of learning in short cycles or learning in longer cycles. Can you say more about that? Like, what's great about learning in short cycles? And can you think of maybe a true story or an example of that you've seen?
Well, I can take an example of a software unit of our company, and how hard it was. We created a monster software product, typically run waterfall, agile in an ideal way, and people realized this will end nowhere. I mean, we had written the requirements years ago, and
Wow.
we're always late, and the traffic lights were green, oops, red.
Yeah.
So although everybody knows since weeks, since months that we will not hit the deadline, nobody dared to say a word. And then the postponement was not months, but it was half a year. And the beauty about Agile is you realize if you don't hit the requirement of your customer in the next sprint. So it's really, if you ruin a sprint, it's, yeah, so what? It's just a sprint.
Right.
But if you ruin a new release, which took you 2 years to build, then you are really doomed.
That's a whole different thing.
Absolutely, and it makes it more safe for managers as well to embark on that journey, because much less is at stake.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the importance of a learning culture, and also that when it comes down to it, the only person we can typically change is ourselves. What have you learned about yourself and about learning in the course of your journey?
Well, I learned something only yesterday, and those learnings are not often very pleasant.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I guess you need to be open for that, and it was basically on a failure culture, and I was asked the question, how is it for you to say that something went wrong, or even to ask for feedback. And it was really quite a sobering experience for me. But I think this is a quality of a change a changer or a change agent or a change leader, facilitator, to eat your own dog food in a way, and don't come across as the Holy Spirit who has all the answers.
Yeah.
But it's hard for us as well.
Absolutely.
It's human to not want that. And the conclusion for me was why I was not doing it is that there was an environment of punishment or certainly not appreciation of mistakes. And this is where, when it comes to change, the role model of a leader is so important. And how often is it that you get the job of facilitating or managing a change, and you hear or feel that it comes from an angle of, yeah, I delegate the change to you, you do the change thing, and I do my business. And then you're lost already. Because there's a saying in education and in children, you can try to make your kids do what you want. In the end, they mimic you anyhow. So it doesn't count what you say, but what you do. And this is why change, but it needs to start at the top, but it certainly needs to be lived at the top.
What would be one small step or action that would help it to become more lived at the top?
For sure, that's very dependent on the personality of the leader and of the leadership team. So I would never prescribe anything to that, but I would lead them into a reflection of what they think their people think, and really quiet them down so that they become self-aware, self-reflective, and then declare this one thing for them that they want to do. Because only if that synapse in their brain is built by their own thinking, chances are that they will actually do it. If we prescribe it, they will say, yeah, let him dream again.
Yeah, and it reminds me of what we were talking about before we turned on recording, which is your ideas on how change happens. Like, there's all these debates, like, should change start at the top? Should it be bottom up? What's the role of the middle layer? What's your take on that?
Yeah, we are so well in our Western education to think either or, yes and, black, white, right, wrong. Yeah. So on that question, does change need to start from the top or be pushed by the bottom? The answer, of course, is yes and. You need both. And then the third component is middle management. I was once part of a very, very big change of a big company, and I was very early on in my career. I was one of these great change agents, and we did so many things. Many of the tops were exchanged and were following the new boss in a way, not 100%, but good enough, I would say. And then there was this marvelous, wonderful avalanche of change workshops and what have you, with going from 30 to 100 to 500 to 1,000. Many people were infected. It was a beautiful machine.
Huh.
Luckily, it was not just flower power stuff, but we worked on real projects. So it had that reality component as well. But in the end, it died in the middle. Because
what caused that death?
Well, they of course felt for their position. They felt, oh my God, if now all of a sudden these crazy guys here in the bottom do strange things that I'm not aware of, I rather not follow that.
Mm-hmm.
Another change that I was on had very high uncertainty, job uncertainty in the whole organization.
Mm-hmm.
How can you address middle management as drivers of change?
Absolutely.
If they fear for their jobs themselves.
Of course.
So totally natural behavior.
Absolutely.
but you need middle management as well.
I'm so glad you're raising that. You know, in these transformations, I often think of middle management as the lost layer, precisely because of what you raised. Like there's all these shifts going on, especially with Agile, and people wonder, am I still relevant? Will I still have a job? So that's a bigger topic, maybe, and I realize we have like 1 minute left, so I want to be respectful of your time. What would you say to middle managers about change if you could send them one message?
I would make them reflect, what can you let go of to be open to the new?
Mm-hmm.
Because often all this mechanistic managing and decision taking, it's no fun for them.
No.
So by asking them what would you like to let go of, maybe and hopefully they come to the good old classical mechanical stuff that they don't have to do anymore. And by asking that question, they become curious. What else could I do? You are still, I mean, even in holocracy, you need leadership, and you need, this cannot be just the head of the organization. And it managers giving direction as well, and removing obstacles, and coaching people and helping them, but just not controlling them anymore as much as in classical management you would do.
Mm-hmm. And so that middle and senior leaders not only still have a role in transformation, but they have a very important role.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So any final things you would like to add? Like if you could say one thing that
I would like to leave you with a quote that I really loved from a change agent that I learned a lot from. And he said, as a change agent or change facilitator, you need to be weird. You need to be different. But make sure that you're just weird enough to irritate the system, but not be dispelled by it.
Not so weird that the system kicks you out.
Exactly. Which goes back to the beginning of our conversation nicely and unplanned, that you need to meet managers where they are. If you're too different and too strange, they don't consider you.
Can't relate. Yeah. Gosh, thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation, and at every turn I see like other topics we could, go down that road and explore. So really want to thank you for your time and your thoughts.
Thanks a lot, Kelly. It was fun.